Okay, last time we left off here creating our puzzle field, setting the settings here for our grid layout and preparing our button here in the prefabs folder. Here I've created our game controller which holds this add button script, and we are going to use this script in order to lay out our buttons, well, through code. For that, simply double click it so MonoDevelop will open it. I'm going to remove these two functions and simply going to create the awake function, which is the first function that's going to be called when we run our script. Now we need two variables in order to practically lay out our buttons. For that, I'm going to type here serials field, and we need a private transform, which is going to be puzzle field. Now a transform is what we see here. So if I select my puzzle field, this is the transform. For our game object is a rect transform because it's a UI element, but if we select a game controller, we see that this is our transform. So we have the position, the rotation, and the scale in our transform, and we can use it to move the player, rotate the player, so on and so forth. We will take a look at this a little bit closer when we create one of our platformer games, which is going to be soon, don't worry. Anyway, here we have now our transform puzzle field, which we can see, and if you watched one of my videos or if you watched my guess the number game, you saw that we have two ways in order to get a reference to a game object from the scene. So one way is to create like this serialized field and then drag and drop our game object. So here we need our puzzle field transform, so I'm simply going to drag and drop it here in order to have that transform, that is. The other way is to use get component. So if you're not sure how to do that, take a look at my guess the number game, everything will be clear. Anyway, moving on, here we need a serialized field again, and this is going to be a private button, or here it's going to be a private game object, and I'm going to name it BTN. Now, what we are going to do with this game object is we are going to use it and create a for loop, and we are going to add or set the transform, the parent of our game object, to be this one, so our puzzle field. So how can we do that? Previously, in the previous video that is, I said that we need to lay out 8 buttons, as we saw that our game has 8 buttons. So here I'm going to say for int I is equal to 0, as long as I is less than 8, increment I. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a game object, which I'm going to name button, and is equal to, and I'm going to use instantiate, and I'm going to pass our button. Now instantiate is a function of mono behavior, and this function practically creates a copy of a game object that we provide. In our case, we have provided our button. It will simply create a copy and assign it to this game object. Next, what we need to do is we need to use our button, and we need to say dot name is equal to, and type these quotation marks and then plus I. This is going to name our button from 0 up to, well, I, as long as I is less than 8. So from 0 up to 7. And this is going to be important in our code, which I will, well, emphasize when the time comes, and I will show you for what we are going to, well, use the names of our buttons. And the last thing that we need to do is we need to say button.transform.setParent, and we need to set our puzzle field. Now one thing or one issue that I want to point out, if we go back now, we also need to attach our button, so we can go here in our prefabs folder and drag and drop our button here for the button. If I run the game now, we are going to see that we have our buttons, but we are not able to see them. So they are here, but we are not seeing our buttons. That is because we need to go here again in our script and add one more parameter. As we see here, we have a transform and we have world position stays. Well, we don't want the world position to stay, so we are setting to be false because this other parameter is a Boolean parameter. So click here or type set parent and then pass the parent, which is our puzzle field. And after that, well, type here false because we don't want our world position to stay. Now, if we go back in our Unity editor, and now if I run the game, we see that our buttons are laid out and we see them here in our scene and they are interactable. And we also see here that they are named 0, 1, 2, 3, up to 7. And if I go back here and comment this line of code out and run the game, our buttons are named puzzle button clone. So it's really important that we type this line of code here in order to name our buttons while using the indexes, which we are going to see later when we set up our game why it is important. Well, that's everything for this video. Again, I will run the game and we see that we have laid out our buttons, well, in our puzzle field through our code. And next we are going to begin to program our gameplay.